we're having Mike Florio on to talk about everything going on in the NFL, and obviously the draft 9 days away. But it just hit me with Keith Hernandez in studio in hour number 2. This is one of the great Seinfeld referencers that there is on in sports media. Joining us here on the Rich Eisen Show prior to Keith Hernandez in studio is Mike Florio. How are you, Mike?
Rich, I'm doing great, and I've done a little research for you.
Yes.
Keith Hernandez said back in 2015 that he still makes roughly $3,000 per year.
There you go.
For his Seinfeld appearances.
Yeah, I do not make that from my CSI.
That's shocking.
That means he got paid more than Scale.
So Seinfeld hooked him up.
Yeah, I mean, he also helped him move, right? That makes sense. One of the greatest episodes, right? Those two episodes.
But he only didn't help him move. Remember, he begged off. He decided that was taking the relationship too far. So it was Kramer and Newman who swooped in after they decided they no longer hate Keith Hernandez, even though he spat on Kramer. Although it wasn't him, it was Roger Goodell. They went and helped him move.
I knew you would keep us down this straight and narrow on that.
Yeah, we got to be accurate.
Mike Florio here on the Rich Eisen Show. All right, let's just jump in here. What's going on with the Texans? Why did the first thing out of Nick Casario's mouth yesterday start with he's not leaving? He even made a Wolf of Wall Street reference. What was that all about yesterday?
Well, there were some rumors that surfaced last week that he's leaving after the draft. And, over the years, that comes up from time to time in connection with a given GM. And my experience has been that more often than not, when those rumors start circulating, there's something there. I remember it happening with Mike McCagnon, the Jets GM, a few years ago, and I remember poking around before the draft with people who would presumably be in a position to know, and it was like, no, everything's fine, he's not leaving, and then boom, he's gone. It happened with John Dorsey with the Chiefs right after he drafted Patrick Mahomes. Now, Andy Reid runs the show there, but still, GM fired right after the draft. So when I hear something like that, I pay attention. So John McClain, who has covered that franchise forever, he raised it and knocked it down. Mike Silver of the San Francisco Chronicle, formerly of NFL Network, he said that the talk is Adam Peters, the 49ers GM, would be in play to replace Caserio if he left. And so he had to say something. He felt compelled to say something. But when you look at what he said, Rich, he made it clear it's his perspective. The circle isn't complete until ownership says he's not going anywhere. It's one thing for him to not be leaving, but if ownership has decided to make a change after the draft, and until Cal McNair comes out with a statement or a quote or something that says this is all phony and exaggerated and fake, then I think we still have to pay attention to the possibility that a change is going to be made after the draft. It's exactly what they did 17 years ago when Bob McNair, the late founder of the team, Cal's father, fired Dom Capers, the head coach, right after the season, and then after the draft, Charlie Casserly, the GM, technically resigned, but the thinking was he got pushed. So I don't think it's over yet. All we know is Caserio, from his perspective, isn't walking away.
Does this have anything to do also with the notion that Caserio also did nothing to squelch on Monday that the Texans' second overall might not take a quarterback? I mean, what's up with that?
Well, we had assumed for a while, and really once the Panthers slipped into the number 1 overall spot March 10, we assumed they were going to take C.J. Stroud. The betting markets rocketed in the direction of Stroud. So it would leave Bryce Young for the Texans, and we thought that's how it was going to go, Stroud, Young. Well, as time went by, it's become more and more clear it's going to be Young to the Panthers. So what do the Texans do? And now lately this idea has emerged that they may not go quarterback. And, Rich, the flicker first came from me when D'Amico Ryans, the coach of the team, was speaking a week or so ago, and he talked about how it's important for whoever the number 2 overall pick is, whoever it may be, to not feel like they have to be the savior of the team. And for a defensive player, if they go edge rusher, it's harder to justify that status. You expect stats from someone like that. With a quarterback, it's easy. You go out and you light it up for 4,000 yards. You justify that pick. It's almost the same situation as when they took Mario Williams number 1 overall. Like, how many sacks do you need to get people to say, yeah, that was a good decision? And I think that D'Amico Ryans putting that idea out there, I think in hindsight is a clue that they're thinking about not going quarterback second overall. And look at where Ryans just came from. 3rd overall 2 years ago in San Francisco. Trey Lance, how's that worked out after they traded up to get him? Last year, final pick in the draft, Brock Purdy. How's that worked out? So I think Ryans is bringing some perspective to this process that may push them away from quarterback at number 2.
And then, of course, when there's a rumor that confuses people, that's where conspiracy concepts start to fill a void. And again, a team like the Texans choosing second overall and having the pick of the entire quarterback class, save whoever is chosen by Carolina, just is so confusing of a notion. Even though Will Anderson is really talented, and we're assuming that's who the first player off the board could be. This one long windup for the pitch to ask you about the conspiracy theory that the Texans won't take Stroud. They will definitely not take a quarterback second overall, certainly if Stroud is that choice, because he shares the same agent as Deshaun Watson. Is that possible?
Oh, I think it's definitely possible. Look, there have been relationships between agents and teams that have become ruined in both directions. There'll be an agent that doesn't want to deal with a given team, a team that doesn't want to deal with a given agent. There have been some notorious agents in the past. There was at one point when Sean Merriman came out, he had hired a different agent who helped get him drafted high, the late Gary Wishard, and then fired Wishard after the draft and hired a different firm that if he had had that firm from the get-go, he wouldn't have been drafted as high as he was because his agents that he was represented by, I don't think they're in the business anymore, but they were a group that the teams were always leery about. So you've got the Texans, who had a very bad relationship with Deshaun Watson and his agent, David Mulugeta of Athletes First. And could that cause them to say, we don't want to have to deal with this again? Now, we'd have to know what's going on behind the scenes to try to mend fences, but it was ugly. Now, at the end of the day, it was a win-win. Look at what the Texans got for Deshaun Watson. They were able to move on, and Watson was able to move on. There's reason for the two sides to find, some common ground in the fact that they both did come out of this with a victory. But it was an ugly, nasty process, and who knows what was said between executives and agent back when Watson made it clear he wants out. And there were some strong feelings. Remember, he had some candidates for the head coaching position that he submitted to the team when he was under the impression he was going to be involved, and they ignored them. Robert Saleh and Eric Bieniemy ignored by the Texans, not even interviewed by the Texans, and those were two names that Watson had supplied through his agent. So it's quite possible there's hard feelings there that still linger that would have to be, at a minimum, processed before you get to the point where you're ready to have another relationship like that with the most important player on your team.
Pro Football Talks, Mike Florio here on the Rich Eisen Show. We just mentioned Deshaun Watson's name in relation to the Texans back in the day and how that might be helping them form an idea of who they refused to take in the draft because of C.J. Stroud sharing an agent with them. So that kind of leads us to the next topic, which is Jalen Hurts' contract not having every penny guaranteed a la Watson's, leaving the Haslams, the owners of the Browns, and the Browns still on that island, contractual island by themselves. The Eagles give Jalen Hurts a generationally enriching contract that, in certain ways to parse it, best contract that's ever been given to a quarterback. What is your 2 cents, figuratively, on that contract and its ripple effect in the NFL? Mike.
Well, it's impossible to make a full assessment of the contract until the full details are made available. And I'll get them at some point. I'm already working it through multiple different angles. I'll get them. I'll break it down. What's the signing bonus? What's the full guarantee at signing? The rolling guarantees, when do they vest? It gives you an idea of how much money he's actually going to make and when the window would open for the Eagles to say, okay, this is a mistake. We need to move on. For example, if the Broncos would have loved to have moved on from Russell Wilson, can't do it after 1 year given the structure of the deal. So there's a certain amount beyond what he's earned in the first year of the contract that he's going to continue to make. So with Hurts, what are those guarantees? Now, Adam Schefter had cap numbers last night, and somebody I know who's very versed in negotiating and evaluating contracts reverse engineered the cap numbers and said it looks like $64 million over the first 2 years, $105 million over the first 3 years. It may not compare as favorably to some of the other deals that have been done. There may even be a question as to whether it compares favorably to the Daniel Jones contract. But we'll see what the full details are. And again, what's that full guarantee at signing? How much becomes fully guaranteed next year when they're not going to cut him after one season? And what does that structure look like? When does the window open for the Eagles to make a change if they decide to make a change? When does it go non-guaranteed? And you know, we had all this talk about Lamar Jackson wanting a fully guaranteed contract. There was no discussion of Jalen Hurts wanting one. And how do you get one unless you're in a situation like Deshaun Watson, where you have engineered this auction where 4 teams are vying, competing for your contract in a trade with the Texans, and you tell the Browns, see you later, at the perfect time when they've pissed off Baker Mayfield and they get desperate. Like, those are things you just can't engineer, you can't anticipate. And Jalen Hurts and Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson aren't in a situation like that. They're negotiating with their current teams. So you can't generate the same leverage that Watson used to get a fully guaranteed contract. That's one of the big reasons why these guys aren't going to get one.
Huh. Okay. So what do you think is the ripple effect, if there is one? Because it seems like the contract that Hurts got will be used as a template for everyone else. He went first. So what do you think about that and how it does relate to Lamar Jackson, which is the biggest question mark, I would say?
Well, with every one of these contracts, if it's good for the player, the next player wants to use it as a template. If it's good for the team, the next team wants to use it as a template. And it all comes down to how the negotiations go between player and team. I could see it dragging down Justin Herbert more than it drags down Joe Burrow, because I could see Joe Burrow saying, I don't care what Jalen Hurts got. I want what I want. And Bengals, if you want to keep me over the long haul, you better give me what I want or you're going to have a problem. I mean, they have made it so clear they're going to do whatever they have to take to keep this guy around as long as possible. They're basically giving him a blank check. Now, will he want a fully guaranteed deal? I don't know that he needs a fully guaranteed deal, and that's another part of this contract negotiation process that I don't think is widely understood. If there's one term or one structure that you really want, you got to give up somewhere else. So if you want full guarantees, what are you giving up on the other side? If you want a high average per year, like Jalen Hurts got, what are you giving up elsewhere? What do you get? What do you give up? And so, yeah, once we see the final numbers, if it's good for the Eagles, other teams will try to use it. If it's good for the player, other players will try to use it. And the bottom line is the cap keeps going up, the market keeps going up, the contracts keep going up, and each one of these contracts gets negotiated individually based upon how far the player wants to push it and what his options are if he decides to say to the team, I'm just not accepting what you put on the table.
Before I let you go, Mike Florio, 9 days before the first round of the 2023 draft, what are you hearing about the top 10 and how it might formulate, best you can tell? Anything new?
Well, the betting markets, I think, are fascinating. They've become a great tool for predicting what's going to happen with the draft. Now, they get some things wrong, but when it relates to the top of the draft, they're pretty accurate. So when you've got Bryce Young, the runaway favorite, he's number one. Number two, you've got guys like Will Anderson and Tyree Wilson who are catching the quarterbacks. You've got Will Levis ahead of C.J. Stroud to be the second overall pick. I mean, you just track it one by one. You look at who the favorites are for where guys are going to land. Jalen Carter, all the talk about him falling out of the top 10. He may not fall out of the top 5.
Really?
The betting markets are pointing to Seattle. So I just think those betting markets are going to be critical to giving us the insight as we get closer and closer to the draft as to how that top 5, top 10 is going to fall. And that's an interesting exercise year to year, looking at what the betting markets are just before the draft begins and how the draft plays out. They tell us not to tip the picks. They don't want us to tip the picks. The betting market may end up tipping the picks on behalf of all the networks who are asked very politely by 345 Park Avenue not to tip the picks.
I don't want. I just so you're aware, and I think I've told you this here, and also personally without a microphone on us. I don't want to know. I mean, look, the NFL draft could easily be done like somebody's fantasy league. You know what I mean? We could do it on an encrypted website where everybody takes 5 minutes for a pick, and we're done by the end of the night, and nobody knows. You'll just learn it. Maybe as it's happening, or at the end of the night, it gets sent out, by a press release. That's the way it could be done. This is a show, and I'm a host of a show, and I don't want to know. I want to be surprised just like everyone else, and I'm assuming everyone's figuring it out the same way.
I agree with you 100%. Rich, look, every year I get the call from someone at NBC reminding me that the league office does not want the picks to be tipped. And every year, the angel pops up on my right shoulder and the devil pops up on my left shoulder, and they have an arm wrestling match. And every year the angel wins because the audience doesn't want it. This isn't a normal journalistic exercise. I've been backstage at the draft.
Yeah.
When it was at Radio City, I would go up there, and we'd have a room in the back, and we'd interview guys, And when you're backstage, you're privy to the fact that they've got 4 picks in. They're just spreading it out to enhance the show. It's not hard. You don't need many contacts to know who the next pick is going to be. This is not Pulitzer Prize material if you find out who it is. It's a parlor trick. It's not hard to find it out. The audience doesn't want it. I agree with you completely. They want to watch the commissioner walk to the podium and utter the name, and they don't want to know it before.
Yeah, they want him to be the Paul Revere. Who's coming? One if by air, 2 if by ground. I don't know. I mean, this is the way I think fans want it, but maybe one day it'll switch, and then
no. I think because that's what it is. You hit the nail on the head. This doesn't have to be a show. It is a show about nothing. Think about what the draft is. What is the useful value of taking this thing to Kansas City or anywhere when you could do it
in 2 seconds?
You could do it through a group text.
Right.
It doesn't have to be what it is, but people love it. So it is what it is.
Yeah.
And the ultimate thing, especially the first night, is having the commissioner walk out, get booed, and then announce the pick.
In that order is what you're saying, pretty much.
Yes.
Yeah. It really is something that to me, I love hosting it, and I love doing it that way, and I hope fans still want to have it delivered in that manner. But so you think Jalen Carter has a short night when it's all said and done, in 9 nights from now?
I think that 5 is his realistic ceiling, and I think the momentum is growing to the point that, who knows, maybe somebody tries to cut the line in front of the Seahawks if people think the Seahawks are going to take him at 5. And if not the Seahawks at 5, how about the Lions at 6? And if not the Lions at 6, how about the Steelers trading up with the Bears at 9? And you think of those coaches, Pete Carroll, Dan Campbell, and Mike Tomlin, respectively.
Yep.
That's exactly what Jalen Carter needs. He needs somebody who's going to push his buttons and get the most out of him. Because when he's focused and motivated and determined, he's generational. The question is, can they get the most out of him? And it comes down to the coaching that you're going to get. That's the one thing that gets overlooked when we talk about the draft. Where does the kid land? And what kind of help is he going to have? What kind of coaching is he going to have? How motivated is he going to be? And those 3 coaches, I think, would be in a position to get the absolute most out of Jalen Carter.
Mike, thanks for the time. Will you be in Kansas City? Do I see you there?
No, I haven't been to the draft since they left Radio City, so that's been a long time ago. 2014 is the last year I was there.
All right, so hopefully you choose NFL Network, because I
will.
Thank you. That sounded like I twisted your arm.
Wow.
Come on. Did I lose him?
I don't even know who hosts it on ESPN.
Attaboy. Hey. So
ever since Berman, and Berman, who used to be the master of subtly tipping the pick,
I know.
The commissioner was walking to the podium. Once he stopped, then that's that.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, now since you've definitely said you're watching NFL Network, I will also definitely say everybody get Father of Mine, where all ebooks are sold.
Thank you very much.
You can go.
I can do a good quid pro quo. $4.99 wherever you get your ebooks. Debuting next Tuesday.
Ladies and gentlemen, order it now. Mike, thanks for the time. Be well. We'll chat soon.
Good talking to you, pal.
Right back at you. That's Mike Florio, everybody. At Pro Football Talk, a must follow. Right here on The Rich Eisen Show. Catch The Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.